Welcome to our deep dive into Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh, this is going to be good.
You shared this one with us.
Yeah,
And it's a book that I think a lot of people have heard of,
for sure.
but maybe haven't actually read.
Mhm.
So we're going to really dig into the ideas
Yeah,
and not just summarize it, but actually see how Frankl's experiences in the Nazi concentration camps
right.
led him to this theory of logotherapy
Yeah,
and how those insights into finding meaning can be
Yep.
applied to your life.
absolutely. I think it's just amazing how this book was born out of unimaginable suffering
Right?
and offers such a powerful message of hope and resilience.
Yeah.
And Frankl was a psychiatrist
Oh,
even
wow.
before the war.
Okay.
So he brought this very unique perspective to his observations, blending the deeply personal with
Right.
analytical insights.
I'm intrigued by just the title itself.
Yeah.
The original title was From Death Camp to Existentialism, which kind of hints at the scope of his journey. And I kind of want to think about how those experiences in the camps
Absolutely.
directly shaped his thinking.
Yeah, for sure. To grasp logotherapy, I think we need to start with the stark reality of what Frankl actually endured.
Right.
He describes a systematic dehumanization process within the camps.
Okay.
Imagine being stripped of your possessions,
Oh, wow.
your name, your identity reduced to a number on your arm.
Yeah, it's hard to even fathom the psychological impact of that.
That is.
It's like they were trying to erase their very humanity.
Exactly. And what's interesting is Frankl noticed that the prisoners went through distinct psychological phases.
Okay.
So there's that initial shock of arriving at the camp
Right.
where there was still a sense of disbelief and denial.
Right.
It's almost like being in shock after an accident. You're disoriented, struggling to even process what's happened.
Yeah.
Then as that reality starts to set in,
Yeah.
they enter the second phase,
Okay.
which is just heartbreaking.
What happens there?
It's a sort of emotional death where apathy sets in as a defense mechanism.
Okay.
They're having to numb themselves to survive the constant barrage of horrors.
Right.
And in that process, they stop caring about things like their appearance, their hygiene, even their own survival.
It makes me think about that story where Frankl himself contemplated suicide.
Yeah.
He reaches his absolute breaking point,
Yes.
but then something extraordinary happened.
Right.
He remembered he had this responsibility to write a manuscript,
Wow.
and that thought pulled him back from the brink.
It's such a powerful illustration of how purpose,
Yeah.
even in the darkest moments, can really be a lifeline. It makes you wonder, what was it about that manuscript that gave him the will to live?
Right. It wasn't just about staying alive.
Yeah.
It was about having a reason to stay alive.
Exactly.
And that leads us to the core of logotherapy, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
So Frankl believed that a primary drive isn't pleasure,
Oh, okay.
as Freud suggested, or power, as Adler proposed. He really witnessed firsthand that even in the most deplorable conditions, humans crave meaning.
It's so true.
He called it the will to meaning.
Okay.
It's that driving force behind our actions and our choices.
Even if we haven't articulated it or thought about it in those terms,
Right.
I think we've all felt that
Yes.
inherent desire
Yeah,
to find meaning in our lives.
for sure. It's a universal human experience.
Okay.
Think about times you felt a sense of emptiness or lack of direction.
Right.
Frankl called this existential frustration.
Okay.
It's when that search for meaning is blocked,
Gotcha.
and it leaves us feeling kind of lost and unfulfilled.
And this wasn't just a theory for Frankl.
Oh, no.
He saw it playing out in the camps.
Yeah.
Amidst unimaginable suffering.
Yeah.
He observed these prisoners finding meaning in the smallest of acts,
Right.
like sharing a piece of bread or witnessing a beautiful sunset.
Those tiny glimmers of hope
Yeah.
became these sources of strength and purpose. It's almost as if they were saying, even in this place,
Right.
life still holds meaning, and I'm going to choose to find it.
It's a reminder that meaning isn't always about these grand achievements. It can be found in the simplest things, even in the darkest of places.
Absolutely.
So how did Frankl take these observations
Yeah.
and develop them into a practical therapeutic approach?
So that's where logotherapy comes in.
Okay.
And it's not about giving people a prepackaged set of answers
Right.
or telling them what their meaning should be.
Yeah.
It's really about guiding them on this journey of self-discovery, helping them uncover their own unique sources of meaning.
One technique that caught my eye was paradoxical intention.
Oh, yeah.
I've heard of this, but break it down for us.
Of course. So it sounds a bit counterintuitive, but paradoxical intention involves facing your fears head on.
Okay.
So, for example, someone who's terrified of public speaking,
Okay.
instead of avoiding it, A logotherapist might encourage them to intentionally try to embarrass themselves on stage.
Oh, I know, right?
So they're basically told to do the very thing they're afraid of.
Exactly. Why would that work?
Well, by intentionally embracing that feared outcome, they can break the cycle of anxiety and avoidance.
Oh, okay.
They realize that even if the worst-case scenario happens, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
And oftentimes that realization is enough to diminish the fear.
It's like pulling the rug out from under the fear by saying, okay, I'm going to give you what you want.
Right.
But guess what? It's not that scary after all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Frankl found it surprisingly successful in treating various anxieties.
Wow.
Not just phobias like public speaking.
Oh.
Think about fear of failure, social anxiety, even insomnia.
Right.
Paradoxical intention can be adapted to a lot of situations.
But isn't there like a danger in this approach?
Yeah.
If a therapist is like encouraging someone to face their fears,
Right.
isn't that coming close to telling them what their meanings should be?
That's a very insightful question.
And it highlights the ethical considerations that are inherent in logotherapy.
Right.
The key is that the therapist isn't dictating the meaning,
Right.
but providing tools and guidance
Yeah.
for the individual to actually discover their own.
Oh, okay.
So paradoxical intention is about empowering someone to confront their fears
Okay.
and their limitations, not about forcing them into some predetermined box.
About giving them the agency to choose
Yes.
their response, even in the face of fear.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've touched on the horrors Frankl witnessed, and
Oh,
we've
yeah.
talked about these foundational principles of logotherapy.
Yeah.
But then he introduces this concept of tragic optimism,
Okay.
which feels almost contradictory.
Yeah.
How can someone be optimistic after experiencing such tragedy?
Right. Well, that's what makes it so powerful and relatable.
Okay.
Frankl isn't sugarcoating reality.
Yeah.
He's staring it straight in the face.
Yeah.
He acknowledges that the tragic triad,
Okay.
pain, guilt, and death, are these unavoidable parts of life, especially after what he witnessed.
Right.
But here's the twist.
He still finds a way to be optimistic.
He does.
But how is that even possible?
Frankl believed that even within those tragic elements, we have the freedom to find meaning.
Okay.
We can choose our attitude, even if we can't always choose our circumstances.
Right.
It's not about denying the darkness,
Right.
but finding a way to hold on to hope within it.
That's really powerful.
It is.
And it makes me think of, like, if he could find meaning in Auschwitz,
Right.
it makes you wonder
It does.
about our potential for resilience and growth within each of us.
Absolutely.
No matter what we face.
Right, and that's where Frankl's message transcends that historical context of the
Yeah.
camps and becomes relevant to all of us,
Yeah.
no matter what we're facing in our lives.
So before we move on to part 2,
Okay.
I kind of want to go back
Okay.
and explore some of the specific deprivations that he describes in part 1.
Yes.
The things that were deliberately taken away from the prisoners.
Yeah, it wasn't just their physical possessions and identities.
Yeah.
It was also their intellectual and spiritual stimulation.
Right.
Imagine being denied access to books,
Oh, crap.
music, any form of intellectual engagement.
It's a kind of starvation in itself.
It is,
Isn't
yeah.
it? Not just physical hunger,
Yeah,
but a hunger for meaning,
Right,
for
right.
connection,
Yeah.
for beauty.
exactly. Frankl describes how even the simplest pleasures,
Right.
a beautiful sunset, a kind word from a fellow prisoner,
Right.
became these profound sources of meaning in that environment. They were starved for anything that
Okay.
reminded them of their humanity.
So how did they cope with
Yeah.
that deprivation? How did they keep hope alive when everything around them was designed to crush their spirit?
That's what's so incredible about the human spirit.
Yeah.
They found ways to resist,
Yeah.
to hold on to their inner selves, even in the face of dehumanization.
Okay.
One way they did this was through stories and fantasies.
Stories. In a concentration camp, what kind of stories?
They would spend hours sharing memories of their former lives or
Oh.
imagining these elaborate meals they would eat once they were free.
Right.
It was a way of escaping the horrors of the present moment
Okay.
and reminding themselves that there was a world beyond the barbed wire.
Yeah.
It was more than just entertainment. It was
Right.
really a way to stay sane,
Yeah.
to maintain their sense of hope.
And it speaks to the power of imagination, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Our ability to transcend our circumstances, even if only in our minds.
Right, and it wasn't just stories.
Yeah.
They also, Frankl observed, that they found ways to create their own forms of entertainment and even humor.
Humor in a concentration camp? That seems almost impossible.
I know, but even in the midst of suffering, they found ways to laugh,
Yeah.
to connect with one another, and to remind themselves of their shared humanity.
Yeah.
It's a testament to the indomitable human spirit.
So finding ways to connect with each other was crucial to their survival.
It absolutely was.
Yeah. Frankl observed that those who had strong social connections were much more likely to survive.
Right.
And we know from modern psychology how important social support is for resilience and well-being.
Yes.
And Frankl's observations in the camps confirm this.
He gives that example of a prisoner who was about to give up,
Yes.
but then found renewed purpose in
Yeah.
helping a sick fellow inmate.
It shows that even in the most dehumanizing circumstances, altruism and compassion can flourish.
That's amazing.
It is.
And it's a reminder that sometimes
Yeah.
finding something outside of ourselves,
Yeah.
a purpose greater than our own survival,
Mm-hmm.
can be what keeps us going.
Absolutely.
And there's this particularly striking story about a fellow prisoner named Otto,
Right.
who was convinced he was going to die on March 30th
Yeah.
because of this premonition he had in a dream.
Right.
And Frankl, despite his own dire situation,
Yeah.
felt this urge to help Otto find hope.
Yeah.
And he did this by reminding him of his wife who was waiting for him back home.
And appealing to his sense of responsibility.
It's amazing that even in those circumstances,
Yeah.
Frankl was already putting his theories into practice,
Yeah.
using meaning and purpose as a source of strength.
And that kind of sets the stage for part 2,
It does.
where we'll see how these experiences actually shaped his approach to therapy
Exactly.
and how we can apply his insights to our own lives.
Absolutely. It's really fascinating how those experiences in the camps really informed his therapeutic approach.
Yeah.
He saw firsthand how the will to meaning could actually sustain people in the most horrific circumstances.
Right.
And it led him to develop logotherapy.
Makes sense that someone who witnessed such profound darkness
Yeah,
would dedicate their life to helping others find light.
absolutely.
So in part 2, Frankl kind of lays out the principles of logotherapy.
He does.
And it all comes back to that idea of the will to meaning.
It does.
Right.
Yes. And he argues that when that drive is frustrated,
Yeah.
when we feel like our lives lack meaning or purpose, we experience what he calls existential frustration.
We touched on that a little bit earlier, but
Right.
how does existential frustration actually show up
Yeah.
in our lives?
Well, it can manifest in so many ways.
Yeah.
Boredom, apathy, anxiety, even depression.
Okay.
Imagine feeling like you're just going through the motions,
Right.
like your life lacks any real direction or purpose.
Okay.
That nagging sense of emptiness can be incredibly unsettling.
I think we've all had those moments, right?
For sure.
Where you just feel like, what's the point?
Exactly. And Frankl believed that this existential vacuum, as he sometimes called it,
Right.
wasn't just a personal problem.
Okay.
It was a societal one,
Okay.
particularly in the modern world.
In what way?
Well, the loss of traditional values,
Okay.
the focus on material success,
Okay.
these things can contribute to that sense of meaninglessness.
So it's not just about feeling a bit lost or down.
No.
It's a deeper sense of questioning, like
Yeah.
our existence, our purpose.
Exactly. And he argued that traditional psychotherapy,
Yeah.
with its focus on the past and internal conflicts,
Mhm.
wasn't always equipped to deal with these existential concerns.
Right.
So that's where logotherapy comes in.
So it's like a therapy focused on finding meaning,
Yes.
even when life feels meaningless.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about helping people discover their own unique sources of meaning,
Okay.
not about handing them a prepackaged set of answers.
So how does that actually work
Yeah.
in practice? How can a therapist actually help someone find meaning?
Well, Frankl talked about several techniques.
Okay.
One is called de-reflection,
Okay.
which involves shifting the patient's focus away from themselves and their problems.
Okay, so instead of dwelling on their anxieties
Right.
and worries.
You encourage them to focus on something larger than themselves.
Okay.
Something that gives them a sense of purpose.
Gotcha.
So maybe it's their relationships,
Oh.
their work, a creative pursuit,
Mm-hmm.
a cause they believe in. It's about finding something that pulls them out of their own heads
Okay.
and connects them to something meaningful.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Like redirecting their energy towards something that matters.
Exactly.
Something that gives them a reason to get up in the morning.
Absolutely. Another technique he talks about is Socratic dialogue.
Okay, I've heard of that.
Yeah. This
Yeah.
involves asking a series of questions
Oh,
that
wow.
guide the patient towards self-discovery.
So it's not about telling them what to think or what to believe,
Yeah.
but it's about helping them uncover
Right.
their own values.
Yes.
Their priorities.
It's a process of exploration and reflection,
Right.
guided by the therapist's questions.
And then there's paradoxical intention, which we
Yes.
talked about earlier.
Yes.
And it seems like it really gets to the heart of
It does.
how we deal with fear.
Yeah. It's about confronting our anxieties head on
Right.
instead of trying to avoid them.
Yeah.
And Frankl found it to be surprisingly effective in treating a whole range of problems,
Like what?
from phobias and anxieties to insomnia,
Wow.
obsessive-compulsive behaviors.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's almost like saying, if you're so afraid of something,
Right.
let's just go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
See what happens.
Well, it's not quite that simple,
Okay.
but you're getting at the essence of it.
Okay.
By intentionally embracing the feared outcome,
Right.
we can often defuse its power.
Okay.
We realize it's not as catastrophic as we imagined,
Yeah.
and that we're actually capable of handling it.
Does he give any specific examples in the book?
He does.
Okay.
One that stands out is the case of a young American diplomat
Okay.
who came to see him feeling deeply unfulfilled.
Was this the one who had achieved outward success but felt empty inside?
Exactly. He was suffering from what Frankl called an existential vacuum.
I feel like that's something a lot of people can relate to.
Oh, for sure, especially in today's world.
Yeah.
He had everything society told him he should want,
Right.
but he felt this profound lack of meaning and purpose
Right.
in his life. And through this process of dialogue and self-discovery,
Right.
Frankl helped the diplomat realize
Yeah.
that his unhappiness actually stemmed from
Right.
not living in accordance with his true values.
Okay.
He was pursuing a career that he thought he should want,
Right.
but it wasn't actually fulfilling to him.
So it wasn't that he was failing or not good enough.
It was about being misaligned with his true self.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. And once he realized that he was able to make a change,
What did he do?
he left his diplomatic career
Wow.
and found work that was more meaningful to him,
Okay.
work that allowed him to use his talents and passions
Yeah.
to make a difference in the world.
It's a great example of how logotherapy isn't about
Yeah.
forcing people into a predetermined mold.
Right.
It's about helping them find
Yes.
their own unique path,
Exactly.
a path that aligns with their deepest values and aspirations.
Another case he discusses is that of an elderly general practitioner who was struggling to cope with the loss of his wife.
Wow, that's hard.
It is.
Yeah.
He felt like his life had lost all meaning,
Right.
and he was sinking into despair.
Yeah.
And in this case, Frankl's approach was to
What did you do?
help the doctor shift his perspective.
Okay.
Instead of focusing on what he had lost,
Right.
he encouraged him to focus on
On what?
what he could still give to the world.
It's about finding a reason to keep going,
Exactly.
even when grief threatens to overwhelm you.
Yes. Frankl reminded the doctor of his responsibility to his patients, to his community, and to his own potential for
Yeah.
continued growth and contribution.
So it wasn't about denying the pain of his loss,
Right.
but about finding a way to channel that pain into something
Yes.
positive,
Exactly.
something that could give his life meaning.
That's the essence of logotherapy.
Yeah.
Finding meaning even in the face of suffering and loss.
Right.
It's not about pretending that everything's okay, but it's about recognizing that even in the darkest of times, there's still this possibility for growth, for purpose, for love.
Frankl also talks about using paradoxical intention
Yes.
to help people overcome these very specific problems
Which
like
is-
anxieties and phobias.
Right.
We talked about the fear of public speaking,
Right.
but are there other examples?
There are. He describes this case of a young man
Okay.
who had a crippling fear of blushing.
Oh, wow.
He was so terrified of people seeing him blush
Yeah.
that he would avoid social situations altogether.
It's got to be hard to live with that.
It is, and it was really impacting his life.
Right.
And in this case, Frankl used paradoxical intention
Okay.
by instructing the man to try to make himself blush.
Really?
I know.
To do the very thing he was afraid of.
Exactly, as intensely as possible whenever he was in public.
But how did that help?
So by intentionally trying to blush,
Okay.
the man was able to break that cycle of anxiety and avoidance
Gotcha.
that had been controlling his life. He realized that blushing wasn't actually that big a deal.
Right.
And even if people did notice,
Well, yeah.
it wasn't the end of the world.
It's like taking away the power of the fear
Exactly.
by shining a light on it.
Yes. And once he realized he had more control over his blushing than
Yeah.
he thought,
Yeah.
the fear started to dissipate.
Yeah. That's a really interesting approach.
It is.
It really highlights how much of our suffering
Yes.
is caused
Yeah.
by our own minds,
Our own mind.
by the stories we tell ourselves
Yes.
about our fears and our limitations.
Frankl would definitely agree with that. He
Yeah.
believed we have far more freedom and agency than we often realize.
Right.
And that even when we can't control our circumstances,
Right.
we can always choose our attitude and our response.
And that choice, that act of will,
Yes.
is really what determines
It
the
is.
quality of our lives.
So in part 2, Frankl lays out this powerful framework for understanding logotherapy.
Yeah.
It's both theoretical and practical,
Yeah.
offering these insights into the human search for meaning and providing tools for applying those insights to our own lives.
And I think one of the big takeaways from this section is that
Yeah.
logotherapy isn't a one-size-fits-all approach.
Oh, absolutely not.
It's highly individualized,
This is.
requiring the therapist to meet the patient
Yes.
they are
Absolutely.
and tailor the treatment to their specific needs.
It's a journey of self-discovery,
Right.
guided by the therapist's expertise and compassion.
This leads us to part 3
It does.
of the book, where Frankl dives deeper into this concept of tragic optimism.
This was added in a later edition, and it's where he explores this idea that even in the face of unimaginable suffering, there's still this possibility for finding meaning and purpose.
The powerful stuff.
It is. It speaks to the heart of what makes Frankl's work so enduring.
It's not about denying the reality of suffering, but about finding a way to transcend it,
Yeah.
to find that glimmer of hope even in the darkest of places.
Exactly. And that's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
We've talked about the horrors Frankl witnessed and how those shaped his theory of logotherapy.
Right.
But in part 3, he brings up this concept of tragic optimism,
Yes.
which feels almost like a contradiction in terms of us.
Yeah.
How can someone be optimistic
Yeah.
after witnessing such suffering?
It's a really compelling concept.
Yeah.
And it really resonates with me. I think
Yeah.
Frankl isn't suggesting that we ignore suffering
Right.
or downplay it.
Right.
In fact, he explicitly acknowledges what he calls the tragic triad:
Okay.
pain,
Yeah.
guilt, and death.
Yeah.
He's not trying to sugarcoat the reality
No.
of the human condition.
Especially given what he went through.
Exactly.
So how do you reconcile this acknowledgement of tragedy with a sense of optimism?
It is a tightrope walk.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so powerful. Okay. Tragic optimism isn't about pretending that everything is fine.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that even in the face of these unavoidable tragedies, we still have the freedom to find meaning. We can choose our attitude, even if we can't always choose our circumstances.
Yeah, it's like saying that the darkness doesn't negate the light. It actually makes the light stand out even more.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
And remember, Frankl saw this firsthand in the camps.
Right.
You know, he observed people who, stripped of everything else, still found ways to maintain their dignity, their compassion, their sense of humor even.
He talks about finding meaning
Yeah.
in the smallest of things.
He does.
Sharing a crust of bread with a fellow prisoner.
Yes.
Witnessing a sunset.
These tiny acts of defiance, these glimpses of beauty and connection became sources of strength and hope.
And that's what connects tragic optimism
Exactly.
to logotherapy, right?
Yes.
That to meaning, even in the face of suffering, is what allows us to keep going.
It is.
That meaning might not erase the pain or the guilt,
Right.
but it gives us a reason to persevere,
Yes.
a purpose to strive for.
Yes.
So tragic optimism isn't about denying the negative,
No.
but about finding the positive within it,
Yeah.
acknowledging the darkness, but also recognizing our capacity for finding light
Absolutely.
within it.
I think that's why man's search for meaning
Yeah.
continues to resonate with so many people
Certainly.
decades after it was published.
Yeah.
It speaks to that very fundamental human need for meaning,
Right.
and also our capacity for resilience.
And it makes you think, like, if Frankl
Yeah.
could find meaning in Auschwitz,
Right.
what does that tell us about our own potential for finding meaning?
It's an empowering thought. And
Yeah.
it's not just about surviving extreme situations.
Right.
It's about finding meaning in our everyday lives.
Right. Even amidst the mundane or the difficult.
And he believed this wasn't just some abstract philosophical idea.
Yeah.
He saw this as a practical approach to life
Yeah.
and developed logotherapy
Right.
to help people actually find that meaning.
So as we're wrapping up this deep dive, what do you think is the most important takeaway for our listener?
Well, I think Frankl's work offers a lot of important insights.
Yeah.
The first being that the will to meaning
Yeah.
is a fundamental human drive.
Right.
We're all searching for it,
Yeah.
whether we realize it or not.
And when that drive is frustrated,
Exactly.
it can lead to a lot of problems.
Yes.
Boredom, apathy, anxiety.
Yep.
It's not just some self-help buzzword.
Yeah.
It's essential to our well-being.
It really is.
Okay, what else?
The second thing is that meaning isn't something that's just given to us.
Oh,
We
so-
create it
Okay.
through our actions, our choices, our attitudes.
So we're not just passive recipients of meaning.
No.
We're active participants in creating it.
We are. And third,
Yeah.
even in the face of suffering,
Yeah.
there's still the possibility for finding meaning.
That's tragic optimism.
Exactly.
It's about finding that glimmer of hope,
Yeah.
that sense of purpose, even when things are tough.
I think that's incredibly powerful and hopeful.
Yeah.
It suggests that no matter what we're going through,
Yeah.
no matter how difficult things might seem,
Right.
there's always that potential for finding meaning and purpose.
It's inspiring.
It is. And lastly, I think Frankl reminds us that we're not alone
Yeah.
in this search for meaning.
We need each other.
We do. We need connection,
Yeah.
support, and love.
And when we reach out to others,
Yeah.
when we offer our gifts to the world,
Yeah.
we not only find meaning for ourselves,
Right.
but we also help create a more meaningful world,
Absolutely.
a more compassionate world for everyone.
It's a beautiful message.
Yeah, so I hope as you continue reflecting on the ideas
Yeah.
in Man's Search for Meaning, think about how they apply to your own life.
Yeah. What meaning can you create?
Yeah.
What challenges can you transform
Yeah,
into opportunities for growth?
right. How can you live a life that's both authentic and purposeful,
Mm.
even amidst the inevitable difficulties?
Because even in a world filled with suffering,
Yeah.
there's always the possibility
Yeah.
for finding meaning.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
My pleasure.